Friends, welcome to Holy Trinity Catholic Church, where we believe, belong, and become. Back to the basics in God. On this first Sunday of Lent, we are taken to the very basics that we have in God. As the devil tempts Jesus in the desert, Jesus reiterates over and over again and shows his allegiance and his foundation in God. Back to the basics in God. When the devil tempts us with food, power, and honor, do we recognize our authentic identity and the foundation and the basics in God? The readings take us through this anthropological, theological, and Christological nuances, connotations of our identity. Back to the basics in God. We go back to the basics, the beginning. We consider the goodness of God in the first reading in the Garden of Eden. Despite the disobedience, God's graciousness is lavish. Next 4 Sundays, the first readings will take us through this going back and forth of the humanity and the lack of recognition of the basics in God. But yet, God's loving presence comes to us in the face of human sinfulness. Filled with the allusions of wisdom, the east side in the Garden of Eden refers to the place where sun rises. The center of the garden, where the tree of life is situated, refers to our very center in God, the very existence of who we are. In the middle of the garden was the source of light and wisdom, source of all knowledge. Focus on the fall that the humanity has taken from the grace of God through the cunningness of the serpent in the first reading shows forth the fragility of human condition. Made of dust, we are made from the dirt of the earth, refers to death and decay, mortality and sinfulness. At the beginning of Lent, we are reminded of these beginnings. We are invited to acknowledge humbly and realistically who we are. The dust of the earth. That is what we have signed ourselves on the Ash Wednesday with the ashes. Humbly accept that we have sinned and recognize our beginning in God and accept God's mercy. The most beautiful thing happens in the second reading. Despite this fundamental weakness of the human nature, of sinfulness, God did not let us die in that condition of hopelessness and mortality. We feel God has not deserted us. God has not abandoned us to our own guilt. As the sin entered the world through one man's disobedience, grace has entered the world through another man's, Jesus Christ's, obedience. We are taken back to the beginnings, the basics in God. As because of one man's disobedience, we were condemned. Now, because of the obedience of one man, Jesus Christ, we are justified. We are given the liberation. Disobedience to obedience. Transgression to righteousness. This is the shift that happens. God's graciousness takes us from the transgression to the redemption in Jesus Christ. We're not allowed to be left in our thoughts of destruction, but we are given this chance of liberation and righteousness through Jesus Christ. But for that to happen, we go back to the basics, our foundation in God, not just anthropologically, not simply theologically, but Christologically. In the gospel reading, we see how these trends continue, how the Satan, the devil, tempts Jesus from anthropological to theological claims, but Jesus does not forget his identity of who he is in God the Father. Let us look to Jesus. There we see humanity at its best, not simply succumbing ourselves, giving ourselves into sin and temptation, but going back our basics in God. We are asked, we are challenged to overcome the sinfulness. There will be human limitations, there will be weaknesses, but that will not condemn us to this transgression for eternity, because through one man's obedience we have moved from transgression to liberation to graciousness. With Jesus, we are not doomed. When we recognize these temptations of food, power, and honor will not take us away from the very identity of who we are in God. The God we are called to serve is the God who brings us mercy and compassion. This is the God who has given us Jesus as the model to withstand the temptations against food, power, and honor, where devil could possibly snatch us away and lead us back into that mode of transgression. But Jesus gives us the model to live justified, to live liberated, and accept the graciousness of God. Back to the basics in God: our origin, our dignity, our being saved. Disobedience to obedience, transgression to righteousness, old Adam to new Adam in Christ, Jesus Christ. On this very first Sunday of Lent, let us get back to the basics in God, what we have in Jesus Christ, against the temptations of food, power, and honor. And let us move from anthropological to theological to the Christological of identity of who we are in God, the basics and the foundations of what we have in God. Father Praveen Lacassetti here at Holy Trinity Catholic Church in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you.